Now, on most of your smaller cars and most front-wheel drive cars and things like that, you're going to have a transaxle, or you're going to have, on the case you have all-wheel drive, or you have a rear-wheel drive car, you're going to have one of these, which is called a semi-floating axle. And with these are lightweight. They're not really rated for much performance with these. It's pretty simple. You take it apart, you would take all these bolts off to take the case out, and once this is open, you have your ring gear and your pinion gear inside of there. And once you have one of these open, we'll walk down by the full floating axle down here, and it's basically the same concept. These are a little bit bigger with full floating because you have your brakes and everything's built onto the axle assembly, but the same concept with these. On a full floating axle, you have your ring and your pinion gear, you have the carrier pin that holds it in place. And on a semi-floating axle, normally you would take the clips or whatever's holding in the ring and pinion gear, you would take that out of your way. And when you do that on a full floating, there's a pin that holds the axle in place. On a semi-floating axle, you have usually just like a C-clip or something small, and you'll pull that clip out, and then you just you may not even have to, but if you have to, just give the axle a little bit of tap on the end of it, on the back side of the flat part with the hammer, and it'll come right out. On a full floating axle like this, you're going to have these clamps and the pin. So inside of that, once you take all of that out, then you can take your axle out. Basically, a full floating axle, this is used for use in heavy duty as like a truck, or a truck heavy duty, definitely like used with a 4-wheel drive, F-250, one of those type vehicles. And then the semi-floating axle would be more the 3/4 axle was used in a lightweight truck like a F-150, or maybe even one of the bigger Jeeps like a Wrangler or Rubicon would have that. And each one's pretty much the same design. They're just a little bit more complex depending on what they're built for. But inside of here, when you have the gears, it's the same concept. Just as you get bigger with the full floating, the gears get bigger. So like I said, when you're doing that, you want to make sure as you're doing it, you want to measure run out, you want to mark it to make sure you put it back in the right place so that all your ratios stay the same. But as you look more inside of here, there's pins and clips and bearings, and you'll just take those out and mark them and make sure you put them back on the right side. And basically you do the same concept for all three. Like I said, the smaller ones usually have a C-clip or some sort of clamp in them. They're not as big as those. They don't have to have bearings with bolts on them because they're not used for heavy duty applications. But basically it's the same concept. Just know, it's all pretty simple to do. Just make sure you're doing it right. Take your time, pay attention, follow procedures, and you should have no problems replacing it. It's all pretty self-explanatory.